Just got back a few minutes ago from the store, from the grocery store. Are people naturally shy, fearful? I know they're fearful. I think that's a common trait in humans, fear. Are they that shy, or are they just that angry and annoyed? What is it? I find this commonly at the grocery store that I'm going up and down the aisles, and there is a fairly clear understanding of who has the right of way. And even if that's not understood, you use some level of common courtesy. And we're people. We're all people. We can communicate. We can speak. We can talk. We can look at each other in the eye and say, "Excuse me," or "Pardon me," or "I would like to get to something behind you," or whatever the case might be. We can express ourselves. We can express what we need or what we expect of the other person. And again, we're all pushing around shopping carts around the store, and it's not a difficult thing. It's not a difficult thing. We are living in America. We all have enough money to at least go out to the store. Those people that are at the store and purchase whatever they need. And so it's not a painful process, but my goodness, people just, they can't open their mouths. It's like they can't look at you. They can't lift their head high enough to look you anywhere close to in the eye and express whatever they need to express. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'd like to get to something behind you, or whatever it might be. This just fascinates me every time I go to the store. It's up and down the aisles, and I'm really not that amused with it. At times I get amused, but I think it's just a sad state of affairs, and it's a sad display of human behavior. It just, and sometimes, depending on how sarcastic I may be, which I've got a sarcastic bone or two in my body, I will take advantage of certain situations where, for example, there's a wide aisle. There's room to cross 3 widths of carts down the aisle, and people will park their cart, and it will take them 45 minutes to determine what type of cereal they want. And they will have no concern or no awareness to anybody else needing to get by, and they just leave their cart. And so I'll say, "Excuse me," and then if I get no response, I'll just kind of act like I like to play dumb sometimes, and that's easy for me to do. Play dumb, and I'll just kind of run into their cart and be like, "Oh, excuse me." It's just fascinating that people won't speak to each other. We're all humans. We should all be very kind and expressive to each other. We don't have to be best friends, but pardon me, excuse me, thank you. I think there's a general understanding that when you're going down the main aisle, that you're kind of on the road. That's basically the comparable situation. You're on the main drag, you're on the main road, and then these side aisles, those people are kind of leaving the parking lot to come out onto the street. And so sometimes they'll just come out and they expect you to stop, and it's like, well, you need to look. It's just fascinating. And even then, it's not a big deal if they didn't see me, or they weren't thinking, they were thinking about whatever. That's fine. I'm not going to. I have some grace to offer. It's not a big deal. So you can say excuse me, or I'll even say excuse me, but I would expect some type of exchange there. There were 3 or 4 times tonight where even though I really rightfully had that space or that way, I still said excuse me, and then you just get no response from most people. There was finally, after about 10 occurrences of this, there was one particular guy that said excuse me. Even before I had a chance to say excuse me to him, he kind of came around the corner. You're at the grocery store. It's not a perfect situation. You come around the corner and you may like almost run into somebody or whatever. Excuse me, I'm sorry. This one guy was the first guy. An elderly gentleman was the first one to say, excuse me. And I said, oh, no problem. Is it that difficult? And some of these people, I just think they're, and this is a sad determination to make. I just think that they're kind of afraid. So anyway, trip to the grocery store. All right. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. And we do have the phone lines open at 860-499-3332. We've got a decent Friday night of games, a doubleheader of sorts, I believe, on ESPN2. The first game, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's taking on Boston College in beautiful Chestnut Hill. And the second game is on Fox, probably FS1. Stanford, Utah. The Utes still looking to go to the Pac-12 championship game despite a loss. What was that? I'm losing track of my weeks. They beat UCLA recently. Was that last weekend? They also lost to Oregon State recently. I think they beat UCLA 2 weekends ago. And they lost to Oregon State this past weekend. No, maybe it was the other way around. Regardless, in the last 2 weeks, Utah has both beaten UCLA, which was a huge win in the division, and they have lost to Oregon State, blowing a 14-point lead at halftime. Utah is no great team in the Pac-12, but by Pac-12 standards this year, they're in the running for a championship. They are in the running for a championship. And I tell you, the way Oregon has played this entire season, except for one particular trip to Columbus, Ohio, they would be looking up 3 or 4 spots at first place in any other conference in America, you would think, based on the way that they've played. But that Pac-12, for as fun and fascinating as it is, and I would love to be able to watch all the key games down the stretch. I say that, I think that all the time when I look at these games each weekend. Oh, I'm going to watch that game and 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 that game. You can only watch so many games. And the Pac-12 usually gets the scraps in terms of the Voice of College Football TV schedule of viewing. That it's going to be fun. It's going to be fascinating. It's intriguing. I love the setup that we have, let's say, in the SEC Western Division in particular. If Alabama stumbles, then it becomes a free-for-all. I love it for second place in the Big 12 to get to the championship game. It's a log jam. What we've got going in the Big 10 Western Division, in both divisions in the Pac-12, it's fascinating. It's interesting to me. I'm a college football geek, nerd, whatever label you want to put on me. I love that stuff. I don't care if there's a 7-5 team pushing for a division championship like Washington we see tomorrow. This may surprise some people. If Washington wins over Oregon. Yes, Oregon's number 4 in the country. We can talk college football rankings and all that business, the playoff rankings, but Washington will control the division and trip to the Pac-12 championship game if they beat Oregon. I love the chaos. I love championship races, division races to conference championship games. I think that is so much more interesting because it's actually tangible based on wins and losses than having a committee tell us who's good and who's not so good. That I'm fascinated by that, but make no mistake about it, the Pac-12 is awful. So we've got the Hokies and the Eagles of Boston College. Jeff Hafley's team, not quite as good as I thought that they were at one point in the season. They got off to a great start against a bad schedule. Then they ran into the ACC, and as bad as the ACC is, Boston College has not been able to beat anybody in the ACC. I think they finally maybe not scraped out a win. They lost to Syracuse by 15 points last weekend. And then again, it's Utah and Stanford coming up. And Stanford, of course, good enough to beat Oregon. We've got a lot of stuff to cover here tonight. We're going to preview the big games tomorrow. It's a week schedule. What can I say? Let's be honest. It's a poor schedule in college football for the first Saturday of November. But These are the type weekends that produce the unpredictable, that produce the upsets, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't have many upsets. So to me, it's still intriguing, still interesting, but we don't have any marquee matchups. The best game of the day on paper by far, I don't even think it's close. The best matchup, if you're looking at NFL talent, sheer talent on the field, on one field. Well, Alabama and LSU may have more talent on the same field, but that's a 28-point game according to Vegas, and I tend to agree. But Texas A&M and Auburn, that is the number one game for me to watch. We'll take your calls. We've got a call coming in, but want to remind everyone to join us on Patreon. I can only say this for about 12 more hours, so bear with me. 13-5 against the spread last weekend. Against the spread, 13-5. Let's do some math here. If you bet $100 on each one of those games, you would lose the $500 on the 5 games that you lost. On the 13 wins, multiply 13 times 90 or 91. It's actually 91, but we will do the quick math of 13 times 90, 1,300, 1,210. Your gross winnings were 1,210. Your losses were 500. You would have netted $710. 107 and 69. I can't necessarily do that math at the top of my head right this second. 69 at $100 per play. That's $6,900 in the red. You win 107 times 91. That's roughly $9,500. If you take my picks this year, you're about $2,800 up. Man, I should increase that Patreon per month, huh? $5 a month should make that thing more like $50 a month. No, I appreciate everybody being on Patreon because many of you could care less about my predictions. And you were just on Patreon. I hear this over and over for many of the people that join us on Patreon that they are, when I ask on a regular basis, I used to do this all the time and I need to do it again, is ask the people on Patreon, what do you want from me? What would you like to see? What do you would like to see additional here? And most people's responses is nothing, just supporting, just contributing. Don't need to do anything here. You're busting your tail, putting out all that content on YouTube. So just here supporting. So $5 a month on Patreon. Just go to Patreon and search Mark Rogers TV. We should pop up immediately. Mark Rogers TV on Patreon, or go to the link in the description section of any of the videos where it says Patreon. All right. Special announcement before we get to the first caller of the night as we preview week 10 of college football, Michigan State, Purdue, another game that I love to see. I believe that's my second most desired watch of Saturday's games. We are going to have a watch party at high noon, Ohio State, Nebraska. And no, that's not going to be the only game I'm going to be watching, but I'm going to be interacting with all of you. I'm going to bring on Nebraska and Ohio State guests. We will interact with them as well. Ohio State and Nebraska, while I keep an eye on the other games. There is typically 5, 6, 7 games at noon. The noon window has actually turned out to be the best window of college football this season. For whatever reason, there might be a great primetime game. A couple weekends ago, the 3:30 window was crazy good. But typically, it's been the noon window that I've been like, we've got like 6 games I want to see. And I can keep 3 to 4 on, but my ability to multitask is highly limited. So anyway, I will be watching other games at the same time, but Ohio State, Nebraska's game number 1 and a watch party with all of you. So join us right here at the Voice of College Football, Ohio State, Nebraska watch party, noon. And one more note on Patreon. I have not released my picks for Saturday. As soon as we wrap up here, guess what? I'm going to work on my predictions and I will release those on Patreon. Did I mention 13-5 against the spread last week? 107 and 69. If you hear nothing from me starting on Monday about my predictions from the past weekend, that'll mean I went like 8-12. We have not had a under 500 week this year. We have not even had a 500 week this year. And also 15-3 money line, 15-3 straight up. And I actually think that's a more valid indication of your ability to predict games. I will argue that with anyone. We can have that argument at some point, that your ability just to pick the winner is more valid than picking against the spread. I will argue that and stand by that with anyone. Ohio State, Nebraska watch party at noon on a Saturday. Let's get to it here at the Voice of College Football. Yes. Who's kicking us off tonight?
Mark.
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah.
It's Alan from the Nebraska channel. How you doing, brother?
I am doing great, and we'll get you on here in just a second. There you are. I am doing well,
Yeah.
Alan. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I just want to recommend to everybody that's listening, I'm a Patreon member, and I encourage everyone to join his Patreon channel. Let's get 1,000 people tonight to join his channel. That's what I want right now.
1,000.
So
That would
with
be
that
beautiful.
Yeah.
I will just add one
Yeah.
other thing, Alan. I hope you know this because I communicate this from time to time. Now, I'm not suggesting that I need any more on my plate, but I do also have a request out there on Patreon, or an offer that if anyone wants an exclusive live stream, that's available every week per request. But Alan, thank you so much for being kind and letting everyone know that. Thank you.
Yeah. I really enjoy your channel. Now listen, I've got to add something to your plate because we see the train wreck coming. Ohio State Buckeyes is going to annihilate Nebraska tomorrow. It's going to be a massacre. So I want you to pick the next Nebraska head coach. You got free reign. Just give me someone. Tell me this is the person for you.
Okay,
and tell Greg too, Tuesday. Tell Greg as well because he needs help. Boy needs help. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now, before I let you know that, I will say that if Nebraska only loses this game by one score and they keep up their string this year of losing every game by one score, then I will be a conspiracy theorist. I don't know what the conspiracy is, but I'm going to have to figure there's a conspiracy somewhere for Nebraska to stay within a score of Ohio State.
Let me tell you something. I was told from someone inside Lincoln that they have to, for him to even consider keeping his job, he has to win 2 of the last 3 games.
Oh, Lord.
And that ain't happening.
No.
So, there you go.
I was playing so poorly on offense, though. I was playing so poorly on offense, I could see that. I still think I was a much better football team, but they're just so anemic on offense. That's a possibility there. Alan, I will say that the first name that comes to mind is a guy that actually, I don't know what his viewpoint on making this move would be, but Matt Campbell has, of course, done such an outstanding job at Iowa State, and he's been able to do it with recruiting classes in the 50s.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Bring his entire staff, pay him $12 million, and have him come on. I'm serious. Well, I agree. I think that's a great name. What about Gary Patterson?
Okay, this is my thought on Gary Patterson. And you know how sometimes we could sit here and we can go through the logistics and we can go through the metrics and all of that. And then some of it's just feel. And I have always ranked Gary Patterson at the top of the Big 12. There are seasons in which during the offseason, I've ranked him as the best coach in the Big 12, even though his teams were not the best. I have the utmost respect. I think it's an underrated story what he did and has done at TCU for the past 20 years. I get kind of the feel that, though, I think there comes a place in a lot of, in most people's career history where they lose a little steam, a little gas, and you need energy and fire and fight, especially to build a program that needs a lift like Nebraska. And I just get the feeling that he's a little bit too comfortable, and he might be just a tad past his prime. I think you need somebody a little bit younger with a little bit more fight.
No, I understand. I understand. Yeah, he's the same age I am. He's 60 or 60, I think. So I got it. No, I understand completely. I do. So that's really all I was going to ask you. You showed with Matt Campbell, and I think Frost is gone. when they asked the director of Nebraska, they asked him about his chance next year, and he says, "We're still considering it." That doesn't sound good with 3 games left.
Yeah, I just can't imagine a 4-8 or 3-9 finish keeps him around after 4 seasons of this.
No, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what everyone's saying. It doesn't matter. Just let's move on. God bless them. Let's move on.
Yeah. And I'm not a Nebraska fan, of course, but just in observation, I've been awfully patient, and I tend to take a pretty patient and measured approach, not, okay, he's lost 2 games in a row, he's gone, get him out of here. And I saw really good things following that first and even into the second season. But once the 2019 season was a disappointment for me. That's where I expected to see decided improvement, marked improvement.
And Mark, but the problem is with him is he hitched his wagon to Martinez.
Yes.
And Martinez was never better than a subpar quarterback. The guy can't throw.
Can you imagine that there's going to be a coach? Yes. Can you imagine that there's going to be a coach at Nebraska, Scott Frost, and we will never know what he could have been with another quarterback, that from the time he started through his entire career there, it was Adrian Martinez. And God bless him as well. From everything I've seen and know, he tries his best. He does his best. He's got talent. He just hasn't learned. He's got 40 starts under his belt, something in that range. And he just, it was like, and I'm not putting these 2 players anywhere near the same category, but it was like when I used to watch Brett Favre the last 5 years of his career, and I would think, well, and again, we're talking about, one of the greatest 10, 15 players at his position in the history of football, but still, it was like he was 38 years old and he still hadn't learned that you can't do some of these things. You can't do that.
Yeah, well, I would use the Oklahoma advantage. The first kid wasn't doing it, so the coach went back and grabbed the true freshman and put him out there at the 3rd game. And I'm like, everybody's screaming Lincoln. You got this guy on here who says he's phenomenal, that Jaime Harbaugh, and he's got a cannon for an arm. I've seen him throw the ball. I mean, it's amazing, and he's accurate. But you never put him out there. So whatever. It doesn't matter. You guys listen. I'm going to tell you, you're all going to really crush us tomorrow. And I'm happy for you. I really am. I hope Ohio State goes the whole distance, because this is a good chance, except for Georgia. There's no one else out there that has a chance against you guys. I've watched everybody. You can beat Alabama. So good luck tomorrow. I mean it. I
appreciate it, Alan. And I appreciate the support. Always enjoy you in the chat, in particular on Tuesday night with Greg. It's going to be on Monday again, coming up this week, though.
What time?
Monday at, we've worked it out at 4 Eastern, 3 Central. That's when we showed up last week. I had to clear because the college football playoff rankings come out, and there's just so much interest in that, of course, on Tuesday night.
Right. So 3 o'clock Central Time. Okay, I'll be there.
Awesome.
Boss. And I'll watch your party too tomorrow. So I'll catch you there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. Yes.
All right, brother.
All right, Alan. Have a good one, man.
No problem. Bye-bye.
We got the Patreon endorsement from Alan. And again, watch party tomorrow. Right here at the Voice of College Football on the Ohio State and the Nebraska channels as well. And here on the main channel. So take your pick. It's the same feed. It's the same thing. And we will watch it all together. Ohio State, Nebraska front and center. But I will be checking out all the games, as many as possible, during that noontime window. Then we will have Nebraska and Ohio State post game on those particular channels. And for you Nebraska fans that catch us each and every week with Greg Peterson, Husker Online Tuesday night, because of the playoff rankings being released on Tuesday, we have moved the show to Monday for the remainder of the season. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. It's McD Sportsport. How are you doing?
McD. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, and I would like to echo about the Patreon channel. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And we do plan to add more to it, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I wanted to call up here. I meant to call you earlier this week when you were talking about the first college football playoff. I guess you would call it a college football playoff release. I meant to call you during that show, but I couldn't get through. But I disagree with the college football playoff rankings. I disagree with the top 6. I don't think that Michigan State should be in the top 4. I think it's prison of the moment. I think Cincinnati I think not Cincinnati. I think Ohio State should be number 4, Oregon number 3, number 2 Alabama, and number 1 Georgia. I think Ohio State will beat Michigan State on a neutral field.
So, McD, you would rank teams based on what you think would happen. And I know a lot of people say the same thing. So basically, Michigan State's done what they've done, which is an undefeated season, and the best wins Michigan this past weekend versus Ohio State losing to Oregon, best win against Penn State this past weekend. You would rank Ohio State above Michigan State just because you think they would beat them.
Also, the resume. I think Ohio State has a stronger resume than Michigan State as well. You look at the Indiana game, Michigan State only beat them by 5. Ohio State blew them out. I forget what the score was. I want to say 34-7.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, I'm trying to think of other opponents. You look at the non-conference schedule. Ohio State, they went ahead. They beat. I know they lost Oregon. That's a one big non-conference game. I know they lost that. That's why Oregon's ahead of them, and they should be ahead of them. I know Miami's picking it up kind of. I know they have 2 top 25 wins technically now, even though I'm not considering anything of all they've won a top 25 win. But I mean, I just think, in my opinion, Ohio State resume is better if you just look to the head-to-head on an Indiana game.
So I understand. I don't agree with you necessarily, but there's a difference between not agreeing with somebody and thinking they're completely ridiculous versus thinking that their point is valid. And in this case, I think your point's valid. I understand your argument. Ohio State. So there's a component there that, okay, who's won the games, who's looked better, and, you know, who's played a better schedule. So for Ohio State, certainly they've been more dominant. As you mentioned, the Indiana game was an annihilation. They had 44 points at halftime. You know, they could have scored 75 points if they wanted to. They could have done whatever they wanted. And Michigan State struggled mightily. Only had a 2-point lead with a couple minutes left in the game. So that's the one comparison. Of course, Nebraska is going to be Ohio State. That's going to be a comparable game because Michigan State is pretty fortunate to beat Nebraska. They did not have a first down in the second half in that game and had to win in overtime and only got to overtime on a punt return touchdown. But that's the only common opponent. Now, you could say Ohio State has played maybe better teams other than the Michigan game by Michigan State in playing Penn State, Minnesota, and Maryland versus what Michigan State's done. They've played Rutgers, Michigan, Nebraska. Who in the heck else? Northwestern.
Where was that Rutgers score between Michigan State?
31-13. Oh, there's another one. Okay, so they both played Rutgers.
Yeah.
Ohio State. And it was another one where you can't even say the final score meant anything. Ohio State had 45 points at halftime and then just, mailed it in. Yeah, so there's your two comparisons. Indiana and Rutgers. Ohio State completely blew them away. And Michigan State had a struggle in one, and the Rutgers game was like a decent competitive game, but Michigan State was clearly better. But it was up in the air into the fourth quarter.
And I'm not saying Michigan State's a bad team. I think they are the sixth best team in the country. I'll put Cincinnati ahead of them because of the head-to-head with Indiana, and I think Cincinnati's win on the road against Notre Dame was actually a bit more impressive of a top 10 win than Michigan State's win. But in my opinion, I just think Ohio State, just resume-wise, if you look at the head-to-head, those two. If everything goes with the way I think it's going to go this weekend against Nebraska, it's going to be that game as well. That's going to be the third game. But I wanted to call up when those rankings came out because I absolutely couldn't believe that Michigan State was ranked number 3. I think they should be ranked number 6. But besides that, I think they did a pretty good job. I think they got the right top 7 teams in. I didn't look really past number 7. But I just want to make that point. I think Ohio State, if you look at the resumes, does have a bit of a better resume than Michigan State if you look at the head-to-head.
So out of all the issues that a lot of people have with that initial rankings, you're picking on Michigan State. You were one of the few. You know that? Yep. Most people have issues with Alabama, maybe Cincinnati, maybe Oklahoma.
Well, Oklahoma doesn't pass the eye test. I mean, he beat Texas Tech with who doesn't have a head coach. So, I mean, outside of that game, what has Oklahoma done? I mean, they came back against Texas. Texas can't hold a lead to save their lives. They struggled against Kansas. They should, to be honest, they probably could have lost that game to Kansas if they didn't get bailed out. Because I still think that play when Caleb Williams took the ball out of the running back's hands, I still think that running back passed the line of scrimmage. So I think Oklahoma got bailed out there. And if you look at the rest of the rankings, Notre Dame's in the top 10. I agree with that. They're probably going to finish the season 11-1 and not make the playoffs because their resume is going to be weak, in my opinion. Cincinnati, I think, should be number 5 because I think, in my opinion, Ohio State, better win comparison with Indiana. Oregon, they beat Ohio State, so you got to put Oregon ahead of Ohio State. And then Alabama at 2. I don't like it, but to me, they just passed the eye test. I know they lost to Texas A&M. A&M, in my opinion, they could beat Auburn this weekend. I think that boosters Alabama's resume pretty good. So we'll see.
Alabama, certainly, if they win out, they have no issue, of course. But what this tells me by the committee ranking them number 2 is that they could possibly lose to Georgia and still make the college football playoff. Possibly.
They could possibly lose to Auburn.
Okay, that better not happen. Lose to Auburn and still make the playoff?
Yeah, that better not happen. They won't make the conference championship if that happens. There's no way that should happen.
Probably not.
So,
it's a possibility.
I know you said
it's a possibility. Like if Auburn beats Alabama, but they lose to Texas A&M, and Texas A&M lose to Ole Miss, and you can have a scenario in which Alabama loses one more game and still gets to Atlanta.
Well, obviously, but if they lose in Atlanta, go 10-3. There's no way they'll make it to the playoffs. I mean, they're not going to get a 10-3 team in the playoffs. I mean, I can't see that. I mean, and when they expand it to 12, they will, which I don't necessarily agree with. But they're not going to get in a 14 playoff. I don't think it will happen. It will not surprise me. I know you said that you think the Alabama-LSU game is going to be a 28-point game. I think that game is at worst within 3 touchdowns. It would not surprise me if LSU at least maybe only loses it by 2 touchdowns. So.
No, I'm just quoting the Vegas line. I'm not saying that Alabama's going to win by 28. I have yet to make a selection on the game. I just know that I saw 28 or 29 on the line.
Okay. But I just want to throw that out there. Two other quick points before I let you go, Mark. One very good interview with the Florida reporter that asked Dan Mullen about recruiting. Yep. I enjoyed that 17-minute interview, Dan Mullen. And I'm still sticking to my prediction. He will be the head coach of Penn State next year. I think he doesn't want to coach in the SEC because he doesn't want to go up against Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, or Jimbo Fisher. And Maryland's going to beat Penn State tomorrow at 3:30 on FS1. James Franklin has checked out. He is going to be going to Southern Cal after this year. And I think it's outside of maybe the Rutgers game, which even then Rutgers could beat Penn State. I do think that Penn State has checked out this season. And I think it starts tomorrow for Penn State on the road against a Terps team, which if they win, they're in a bowl game, which would be huge for Mike Locksley.
Well, again, Penn State was not checked out last Saturday, so you're expecting them to immediately now check out for the rest of the year. That was their last shot.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I think the Ohio State game was the last hurrah. And listen, they played well against Ohio State, in my opinion. They really did. But I think they're going to check out. I think James Franklin has more than one foot out the door. And I think you're going to see it tomorrow, FS1 at 3:30 against the Terps.
Okay, McD.
That's all I have. Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps for beating Penn State tomorrow.
Thanks, man. We'll see you. All right, let's keep going here at the Voice of College Football. Next up.
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP. How you doing?
The real MVP. What's going on?
I wasn't first tonight, but I was on the first set of lines. So
you're here. That's all that counts.
I guess we can. Yeah, I would like to ask you about some things since there isn't a whole lot of good games. Is it fair to say right now Oregon doesn't control its own destiny?
Does not?
When in terms of making the cut. Yes.
That's fair to say. I think few teams completely hold their own destiny. We can come up with all sorts of situations that could box out just about anyone, except Michigan State, Georgia, Oklahoma, the undefeated Power 5 teams.
Bama?
Sure. Oh, in terms of controlling their own destiny. Yeah, Alabama controls its own destiny. Yes. Yeah, let's say Oregon wins the rest of its games and Alabama beats Georgia so that we get two SEC teams in, and then let's say Michigan State wins the Big Ten undefeated, and let's say Oklahoma wins the Big 12 undefeated. Oregon's out.
Okay. Now, this is going to be a strange one, but I think there's some legitimacy to it. If Auburn wins out, are they in?
Sure. Yeah. I somebody asked me the other night, who is the lowest ranked team that still has a chance to get in? And I think there's a collection of SEC Western Division teams, Texas A&M, Auburn, and Ole Miss, who are pretty much in the same boat. And I think they're actually ranked like 12, 13, and 14, something like that. And Auburn has the advantage of only having one of its losses in the SEC. Texas A&M has the advantage of beating Alabama head-to-head from both a resume standpoint and also a tiebreaker standpoint, and Ole Miss would be the one that needs the most help. But yeah, if they can create some kind of tie and Auburn wins, of course, if Auburn beats Texas A&M tomorrow and they win the rest of their games, they knock Alabama out and they will win the SEC West. If they've got a 11-2 record and they're the SEC champ, forget everything else. The SEC champion is in the playoff. But on top of that, having beaten Alabama and Georgia, the last two games on their resume, they're in. No doubt.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because you got people, I'm going to go back to this because I think this is the biggest blunder ESPN made for college football, which is saying something. Them just writing off two lost teams like they can't get in is insane. And I think it's very likely this year a two-loss team does get in.
I don't know if it's likely, but it's the possibility is high. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to say it's more than 50-50, but we're going to see it at some point
I'll put
before
it
we
this
get
way.
to 12. Yeah.
I'll put it this way. It's more likely this year than every other year.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a game nobody's been talking about that has my interest, and that is controversial head coach Hugh Freeze returns to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
You think there's going to be trash thrown on the field? Booze? What do you think the reaction is going to be?
We talked to an Ole Miss guy this week from the Rebel Walk, and I asked him what the fan base felt about Hugh Freeze, which I would think that the fan base would have a lot of disdain for Hugh Freeze because basically everything he accomplished at Ole Miss was a bit of a farce. He cheated in recruiting. He got caught. And in the process of getting caught for recruiting violations, it was determined that he wasn't the greatest husband in the world. So basically his Sugar Bowl championship, his 2 wins against Alabama, that felt good at the moment. And what's kind of strange is that they haven't been, those wins have not been taken off of Ole Miss's ledger, I do not believe. But anyway, I don't know that there's going to be trash thrown on the field. I don't know. That's all sorts of speculation. I would bet against it.
Okay. And I'm only using trash because my Kentucky Wildcats, we played Tennessee, a.k.a. the mustard man, a.k.a. the trash thrower. And this is a story. Can I tell a quick story real quick?
Tell us a story to Real MVP.
Well, Hendon Hooker hates cold weather. And how much does he hate cold weather? Well, he played a game in 2020 against Clemson. And, of course, this is when Clemson was good, not this year. And he was actually visibly shaking on the sidelines because of it being 20 degrees. And it was so bad, he got pulled for a series of the game. Had to go back to the locker room and get near a heater to warm up. When Kentucky plays, it'll be 28 degrees when the game kicks off. I'm not sure if Hendon Hooker's going to be able to play the whole game because of the weather.
So, I don't know if the folks in Vegas have received that information to possibly move the line. That's some interesting information there about one Hendon Hooker. I did not know that. And 28 degrees. They're playing. Is it going to be that cold? Really? Are they playing at Kentucky? I assume. Because it's a little colder there than Tennessee. In Lexington, Kentucky on Saturday night, it's going to be 28 degrees. I don't think it's going to be 28 here in Connecticut. Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be cold. And also, that's the reason Hendon Hooker didn't go to Notre Dame when he transferred, was because of the cold weather. So this isn't a one-off occurrence. So that's something the Tennessee. The more I look at the game for the Tennessee, man, the less and less I like their chances. It just, most years I think they would get us in this spot, but not this year. I just think Kentucky, first off, is a little bit better than most years, and that Tennessee got a lot of players that are either hurt right now due to the injury. Just have ran so many plays, they might be exhausted because they don't have a lot of depth. So I think they'll keep it close, but I think in the fourth quarter, it'll be a 2-score game, but it'll be a 1-score game most of the game.
So what I've done here is I've gone to weather.com. What is kickoff time for this game? 7 o'clock. Okay. 57 for a high, 30 for a low. Obviously, we know once the sun goes down during the fall and winter months, there's a huge decline in temperature. So the 30 for a low, according to weather.com, would typically be an overnight thing. Don't know that it's going to be quite that cold. I'm guessing more like 40 at
Okay, I
kickoff.
checked the weather.
But
Okay.
that's
I'm
an
sorry for
interesting
giving
note.
fake
No.
news out.
I'm not trying to not. I guess I am nitpicking, but I didn't mean to. That's an interesting
it's fine.
note
I'd
about
rather get the
Hendon
facts
Hooker. I was just curious to see the weather because I just couldn't believe it was going to be 28 degrees in Lexington, Kentucky tomorrow night. Well, I guess it's 38
I
here
checked
right
it a few
now.
days ago.
Jeez. Okay, I guess it's getting colder than I thought. All right. I hate the cold.
Me too, but it does make for some great football. I will say that. Like Indiana versus Buffalo a few years ago, they had that Snow Bowl game where it's like 2-3 feet of snow. That was a great game. It's 14-7 the final score. But I want to go on to the Pac-12. Oregon plays Washington, prime time on ABC, which I know everybody's so excited for the Pac-12 being prime time. It feels like the most Pac-12 thing if Washington was to win this game because it's on prime time. I know a lot of people have written completely Washington off after losing to Montana, but they've played better. They control their own destiny in the Pac-12. So, and Oregon hasn't looked good against anyone all season except Ohio State and Colorado. You think it's possible there's an upset?
Sure, it's possible. They're in Seattle. It's only a touchdown spread. Washington is playing better. Yeah, I think it's possible. I haven't really thought about it or made a pick yet, but I will be. Yeah, it is amazing that the division race is up for grabs.
And where's your picks at, Mark?
They're on Patreon, The Real MVP. On Patreon, yes, they are.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
And how much does it cost?
It's $5 a month. 17 cents a day if you do the math.
17 cents a day. I mean, that's less than what, a cup of coffee?
I'm not a big coffee drinker, but from what I understand, yes, my kids are typically bringing over their lattes and whatever they get, their iced coffees. So yes, something in that range.
Well, Mark, that's all I've got for you.
Good
Final
stuff.
thing I will say though is it's at halftime in Miles versus Kentucky basketball. Miles is beating Kentucky 46-39.
All right, we've got our first college basketball update of the year. All right, man, we appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, Miles over Kentucky. College basketball score at halftime. I have no idea where Miles is. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
This is Reasonable Go. Mark, how you doing tonight?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm all right.
It's nice that
Got
I get to talk to
drive-by
you.
topics here.
Okay, it's nice that I get to talk to you tonight instead of maybe seeing one of your sarcastic comments in the comment section a few times a week.
Well, now you get to hear my sarcastic comments.
Yes.
And in voice. It's a lot more endearing that way, right? So when you were doing your reactions to the playoff rankings, I didn't catch it live, but I did go back to watch it to see your reaction to the funny one, which was Oklahoma at 8, and the one that everyone's crying about, which is Alabama at 2. They were rather predictable. Although you weren't that surprised with Oklahoma at 8, which was, I guess, a little Nostradamus of you. But I do want to ask you about your statement, Ben, and one you just recently verified, that you think Oklahoma wins the rest of their games, they are automatically 100% in the playoffs. They're going to take the place of one of the teams that are already there, even if they keep winning.
Yeah,
I find that a little strange.
It's difficult for me to concoct a situation. Go ahead.
Isn't the committee telling us by putting them so far back that they're telling us, well, if all the teams ahead of them keep winning, no, they won't be in the playoffs because we won't have room for them. they're so far. It's not like Oklahoma's 5 or 6, and they're just waiting for someone to lose to get out of the way. They got a lot of teams in front, all of whom could keep winning all their games.
No, they can't.
I mean, not all. Obviously, Michigan State and Ohio State, that's one spot. Or Michigan, if you could find a way to work that in. That's just one spot.
Yes.
But Oregon can certainly win all their games, and that would be the 4th spot.
Think about this. So what does the committee let us know? And this is one of the actual valid approaches that they take, is that they don't play this, we wait in line like the AP poll and the coaches poll. They reconstruct the season every week. They look at the resume, and resumes change considerably from week to week. So what does Cincinnati not have? Let's concoct a situation that is going to make it the most difficult for Oklahoma to make the playoff. Even if they win the rest of their games, they're 13-0 as the Big 12 champion. Okay. Let's say Oklahoma even looks unimpressive in doing this. They win every game by 1 point. Cincinnati's resume.
They do the same thing they've done all year. They do the exact same thing they've done all year.
Yes, but they're going to do it against Baylor, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and then against another one of those teams in the Big 12 championship game. They will have 4 quality opponents that are currently all ranked in the top 25 somewhere. And let's say 2 of them are 11 and 12, something like that in the country. So they are going to rack up 4 quality wins. So Cincinnati's done. They're gone. There's no way they hold up to that resume. Okay, so they're done.
The only team, well, let's just cut to the chase here. The only
done.
team they have a possibility of usurping in the toughest scenario, which is if Michigan State goes undefeated, beating Ohio State, Michigan, and winning the Big Ten, they're not getting supplanted. And in fact, they might even jump to 2.
Yes, but the other
if
2
Alabama
are gone.
beats Georgia, neither of those teams are getting kicked out. Alabama beats Georgia. The team in question here is Oregon.
We've already mixed.
Oregon.
We've moved them up 3 spots. The 2 Big Ten teams done.
Right.
Cincinnati done. They're up to 5. Okay.
So we're talking about Oregon now.
Yes. A Big 12 champion that's undefeated is going to be selected over a Pac-12 champion with that horrible, horrendous schedule. Oregon at 12-1 with all these awful narrow wins that they have. They've been just as unimpressive as Oklahoma.
But the committee did not put Oregon back at 7 or 9 with Oklahoma. They moved them all the way to 4. I think that's giving us a little bit of a message.
The message is that they want to keep Oregon. So this is what the committee wants to do. They can save themselves in this situation. Had they placed Ohio State ahead of Oregon, then they're obviously telling us that the resume is more important. But basically what they're able to do now is that they can keep Oregon ahead of Ohio State and justify it with the head-to-head win, or Ohio State's going to have such a better resume down the stretch that at some point, don't be surprised if we see this flip and Ohio State's going to jump ahead of Oregon. Oregon's schedule is awful.
You don't have to tell. I love getting on here and talking, dragging the Pac-12 and the ACC with you. You don't have to convince me of that. But let's say that, okay, so Oregon handled their business last week, right? More or less. They finally did what everyone's been telling them they need to do.
Yeah, but that's that's like Oklahoma.
I know, but they still did it. They did sort of what Ohio State was doing to all the terrible teams on their schedule.
Yeah, the teams Ohio State did.
What if they keep doing that, and Oklahoma keeps beating these teams by 1 score, last-second field goals? At the end of the season, let's say that what we concocted has happened. Michigan State has booted Ohio State out of the running. They've won the Big Ten. Alabama's beaten Georgia. Oregon wins the Pac-12. Maybe they play Utah twice, and maybe they stone drag them 4 times, or not 4, and twice. So we're sitting there the day after, that Sunday after, we're looking at Oregon, who just, again, skull drug their way to the Pac-12 championship. and Oklahoma, who barely beat whoever, I don't know, Texas or not Texas. Well, I haven't kept up with the Big 12. Maybe Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. And we're going to say this close win team, we're going to then move them ahead of the Pac-12 champion who beat Ohio State.
If we do that, first of all, we're not valuing the record. Number two, we're not putting value in the schedule. The schedules would not be comparable. And I'm no big fan of the Big 12. I don't think it's some kind of powerhouse league, but it's tons better than the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing I would be much more willing to get on this if they just hadn't put Oklahoma so far back. I mean, they're 2 spots behind Cincinnati.
But these spots
like
aren't all created
in my top
equal.
10, I think I had put Oklahoma. I think I had honored them being the only 9-0 team, and I had put them at like 4 or 5 or something. If they had done that, even if they had put them at 6, like trade spots with Cincinnati, they've had Oklahoma's not done well against their competition, but like you say, they have a tougher schedule than Cincinnati, and neither team is looking impressive right now. Everyone says Cincinnati's look good. No, they haven't. They barely beat a one-win Navy and a Tulane team. I know Oklahoma did the same thing against Tulane. That's beside the point. I would still. They have one more win than Cincinnati. They're the only 9-0 team in the country. Let's switch their places. Let's put Oklahoma at 6, right behind Ohio State. Now I can see what you're saying is a lot more plausible. But to just jump, it would be 5 spots from 8 all the way to 4. No, sorry, that's 4 spots. Yeah, from 8 all the way to 4, and in this particular case, taking the place of another team who's 4 spots ahead of you, who doesn't lose any of their more games. That's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to say or to justify.
We also
if the committee was going to do what you say and honor the schedules, if they honored the schedules and they honored the wins and the losses, then I think they should have had Oklahoma farther up than they are now.
Okay.
Not all the way back at 8.
Okay. Let's understand that the separation between each of these spots throughout this top 25, they're not all the same. There could be a gap between 10 and 11 that's decided, that's large. There could be razor thin credit card distance between 3, 4, and 5, and 6. They're not all created equal. I go through the same thing when I do my rankings. I think, okay, that's a clear distinction, but 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 they're basically the same team, same resume. Oklahoma is going to play 4 quality opponents, 2 of which are just outside of this committee's top 10 the next 2 weeks. They're going to play 4 quality opponents. Oregon's going to play arguably 0 quality opponents. None of these teams are anywhere close to the committee's top 25 or anybody's top 25. And if they don't, if the committee doesn't, then they have lost any shred of credibility with me. If they have Oregon in over Oklahoma and Oregon has a loss to a Stanford team that's right now 3-5, what are they going to finish? 4-8? Oh. Then they better send a note of apology to the 2018. Yes, I've got them ranked higher. Yes, they're too low.
Okay. You just think by the time it's all said and done, the committee will work it out.
There's not been an undefeated Power 5 champion.
I don't think it's going to. I think Oklahoma. Well, I'm not sure if Oregon will lose another game, but actually, I don't know. All this could very well happen. Let's just switch. The more likely scenario, we just switch Michigan State with Ohio State, but we still have the same circumstance. Of course, then I wonder, Mark, well, what if that happens? What if it's Ohio State's the one winning the Big Ten? Are we going to move them ahead of Oregon and then Oklahoma ahead of Oregon? Or are we going to let the team that Oregon beat be in the playoffs but not them.
I really don't have an answer for you. I know what I think is right. What is right. I also think I know what I believe to be the better team, but I also believe that the game should count.
We play the games for a reason.
Yep.
This isn't a hypothetical, okay, but I really think Alabama would beat Cincinnati 10 times out of 10 if they actually play, blah, 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 blah. No, Oregon and Ohio State actually did play.
Yes.
And it was in Columbus. That's another. Yeah. That's a trait. That's a thing that a lot of people leave out for some reason.
Well,
that was in Columbus. They had to fly. What'd you say? 3,000 miles.
Yeah. Why did Oregon get on an airplane and travel 3,000 miles to play a football game in one of the toughest places to play? They did that for a reason. They scheduled that game for a reason, and they didn't have their best player, arguably the best defensive player in college football.
I think Uncle Lou was on the phone with you a few weeks ago, and he said that if Oregon wins the rest of their games and they somehow get left out, that if I'm them or any Pac-12 team, I'm never scheduling one of these big out-of-conference games again. If that happens. All right, we got that out of the way. This one's probably a topic you weren't expecting, but I'm not going to take along with it. So a few weeks back, we were dealing with the bowl people. I don't know. There's some sort of committee in charge of bowl games or something.
Yes.
That they want this proposed 12-team playoffs to all take place in bowl games.
Yeah.
Because they think it's, quote, better for college football.
Yep. It's not. It's self-preservation.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's selfish, and yeah. But so you made a comment about how like bowls have kind of an identity, or that they have, like, there's a certain tradition with them. And I think you were talking, like, you brought up the Rose Bowl as an example. Like the Rose Bowl is Pac-12 and Big Ten, and the Sugar Bowl is always SEC and I guess anyone else. Guess the bowl should be Big 12 and someone else. So and again, no one's probably else thought of this. I just wanted to ask you, do you really think the Rose Bowl belongs to the Pac-12 and the Big Ten? I know it has for decades and decades, but before 1947 was the first year that started happening, the Rose Bowl belonged to everybody. The Rose Bowl was the only bowl. In fact, it was the de facto national championship game before the poll era. So I actually loved it when we started getting a rotating BCS national championship game that would rotate between those four bowls, and occasionally would get to the Rose Bowl that allowed Alabama to go out there in 2010, or the 2010 January 1st, 2009 season.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you even said that you didn't really consider that the Rose Bowl. It just took place in the stadium, the Rose Bowl. So I wondered, do you really think the Rose Bowl should just be Pac-12 and Big Ten? Because I really don't agree. I think the Rose Bowl should belong to everybody.
Okay.
Like I don't like that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have this exclusivity deal on it. I certainly didn't. I've gone back and done a little bit of the history on it, and it's all just to basically, hoard the money they make from it to themselves. Alabama has a very, very rich history with the Rose Bowl prior to 1947. In fact, we won the last game that was not just between I guess it was the Pac-8 and the Big Ten back then, where we trashed USC in 1946. We won a bunch of national titles there in the 20s and 30s. So I just took a little bit, not anger. So I just kind of want to see where you're coming from.
Were those legitimate national championships?
I think the Rose Bowl should be open to everybody.
Were those some of those added on Alabama national championships?
No, they were recognized back then. Okay. The 1925 season was when we went undefeated and beat Washington.
Okay. All right.
No, they were undefeated.
So this is all opinion, but this is my take on it. And I am a child of the late 70s on into the 80s. And I grew up, as many people did, for decades and decades with these New Year's Day bowl games being sacred and regionalized to their conference affiliation. So it wasn't just the Pac-10 at the time and the Big Ten at the time playing in the Rose Bowl. It was the Southwest Conference champion playing in the Cotton Bowl and hosting the Cotton Bowl, the SEC in the Sugar Bowl, and the Big 8 at the time and the Orange Bowl. And then the Rose Bowl was the only one that had two conference affiliations, so the other ones would vie for making their invitations and offers to try to create the most attractive matchup, and it wouldn't always serve the rankings or the best matchup on the field, but it would serve bringing Notre Dame to the Sugar Bowl or whomever. Anyway, well, also understand that they're part of the name affiliation was attached to the actual stadium. So we've got a Rose Bowl stadium that's still played in. We have a Cotton Bowl stadium that still stands there, but they no longer play the Cotton Bowl in the Cotton Bowl. They no longer play the Gator Bowl in the Gator Bowl or the Sugar Bowl in the original Tulane Stadium Sugar Bowl in which they played, nor the Orange Bowl, which the Orange Bowl has been destroyed. And so the Orange Bowl is no longer played in the Orange Bowl. So we've done away with that in regards to in all of those games, excluding the Rose Bowl, where we no longer have the stadium. Okay. Now we have, let me see. We also have, let me get this person off the line. We also now have a situation in which these bowl games have been integrated into the playoff. So, for example, we'll take the Alabama-Ohio State Sugar Bowl game from the first playoff in 2014. Why was that the Sugar Bowl? That means absolutely nothing to me that it was the Sugar Bowl. It was the Sugar Bowl because it was played in the Superdome where the Sugar Bowl is played, but it was a playoff game. It wasn't the Sugar Bowl. To me, that's not the Sugar Bowl. I just don't understand. I think it ceases to be a bowl game. It's a playoff game. The most ridiculous of examples of this was Alabama and Notre Dame playing the Rose Bowl. I put the quotations up there. The Rose Bowl in Dallas, in the Dallas Cowboys Stadium last year in the playoffs. Nobody considered that the Rose Bowl. They put a Rose Bowl decal at the middle of the field. Yay, thanks. That's not the Rose Bowl. Stupid. It's just, they're playoff games. It's not the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. They're playoff games.
Why do they have to be exclusive from each other? Like, why can't the major bowls kind of become the playoff games?
You don't
if we permanently go to a playoff system. You
don't like that the SEC champion. Let's go back decades before the playoffs and leave the playoffs out of it for a second. You don't like that the SEC champion has a tie-in to the Sugar Bowl. That doesn't. There's not a connection there. There's not a reasonable connection. It's played in New Orleans, in SEC country. It's sugar. It's named Sugar after, obviously, there's a regional affiliation to the fabric of the South, and the SEC champion hosts the Sugar Bowl. Why would we have the Sugar Bowl and have Washington and Wisconsin play in the Sugar Bowl? Again, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong here. I just don't like it.
How did you say that? Who was the teams that played in the Sugar Bowl when Alabama and LSU played in the BCS championship? It was Michigan versus some ACC team, I think.
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, yeah. No, that doesn't have anything to do with this. I just I couldn't remember. Yeah. But to answer your question, I guess no. I would rather these bowls be open to everybody. I would rather them be kind of new, exciting bowl. I would rather SEC teams get more chances to travel to Pasadena or to, Miami, or, I don't even actually know where the Fiesta Bowl is held. But yeah,
teams can play in any other bowl game.
I don't.
They're not shut out of any other bowl game. I just.
Well, they
think,
are shut out of the. They were shut out of the Rose Bowl.
Well, that's what I
a
said.
long
Any
time.
other bowl game. So I just think they cease to be bowl games. They're playoff games. Nobody cares that they're bowl games anymore. Can people? Do you think? Okay, we've got a pretty large collection of college football fans that love college football. I would love if we handed out a test to everyone, and if they could list who has played in playoff games since 2014 when the playoffs started. I think there would be a high caliber of correct answers where people could name who played in the playoff games, who made the playoffs in 2014. Okay, who played whom, but let's
I know where you're going
ask
with this.
them what bowl games they played in. I bet the remembrance of that would lessen tremendously.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you there. I guess. Well, I guess we do. But we need to face the reality, though. I mean, this is exactly why the bowl committee is the bowl committee. This whatever to call is doing what they're doing, because they know that if they don't get all the playoff games played in the bowl games, there will be no more bowl games in 10 or so years.
Yeah, and I understand that. And
I mean,
I may seem like I never changed my mind on anything, but what, there was one. I don't know if it wasn't a caller. It was somebody that I was on, some guest that I had on the last few weeks, and I can't necessarily prove this. I'd have to go through every year to see if there's a suggestion. And this is not a unique suggestion, but if we went back to the original bowl system, or what has been the longstanding bowl system, and then after the bowls are played, play the +1, these bowl games would retain their value, because you would need to go to a major bowl game and win it to make the national championship game. And there would still be a national championship game that we would have to determine after the bowl games. Now, I'd have to go year to year and figure out, okay, do we have two clear-cut teams? Probably not most of the time. So I don't like that part of it. But it would retain the bowl system and the value of all these bowl games. Plus, we would still have a national championship game. It's not a perfect system, but I think that there's some merit there.
No, yeah, because you'd have to decide. You'd have to make sure you got seeded matchups, and you didn't end up, seeding like the second SEC team against the fifth Pac-12 team, because then who cares about that? That's not impressive if they win that.
Well, that doesn't happen.
It would be really confusing,
in my opinion. Happen with the champion of the SEC.
It does sometimes.
No.
No, I said the second place. I said the second place SEC team. When Georgia played Texas, ironically they lost this, so this is a bad example, but
it is a bad example.
I don't think when they got matched with Texas, when they got matched with Texas, that was a like-seeded matchup.
Well, wait a minute.
I think they should have gotten matched with like Michigan or something, the second team in the Big Ten.
No, the Big 12 has an affiliation with the SEC. That started when, like 2013. I think your famous Alabama-Oklahoma game was the first of the Big 12 affiliation with the SEC. So the number one team, the number one seed.
So there you go. Another example of something wrong with these lockout affiliations. Another example of that.
Why? They were ranked like 6 and 7 in the country or whatever. It was pretty close. Anyway, let me finish my point. That the champion of the champion of the Big 12 plays in the Sugar Bowl unless they are in the playoff, and then the second place team, which was Texas that year, the Big 12 championship game loser, played in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, I recognize all that. I'm saying you would have to come up with some sort of way to make, if you wanted to do bowl games and then the +1 kind of way, you would basically have to do what they're trying to do now and match up either like-seeded teams or match up 1 versus 8 and 2 versus 7.
So,
and that sort of deal anyway. Eventually you're going to have to get rid of affiliations with that, because you can't tie yourself down like that. Oh my God! Well, the SEC team has to play someone from the Big 12.
Well,
So
for one thing, the
that's why you have to get rid of that.
seedings would come from this playoff committee or some kind of governing body, and they would screw it up anyway. So I'm not that hung up on seedings that people put together. I would want to protect, and I know you don't, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 in the Rose Bowl. And so that could be the number 1 team in the country playing the number 14 team in the country.
Well, anyway, I think everyone's dream with the playoff system was that we would have a playoff and then all the other teams would be perfectly happy to go play bowl games outside the playoffs. So they're honorable mention,
you're right.
consolation prize.
Yeah,
we all dreamed of that,
yeah,
and that was apparently unrealistic.
You're right. We didn't foresee this. When I thought, okay, there's going to be a playoff, awesome. There's going to be a playoff, and I'll still enjoy watching the Outback Bowl, watching Wisconsin and Auburn play in the Outback Bowl, but I did not consider, yes, athletes will say, doesn't really mean much to me. See ya. I got to prep for the NFL draft. And people are going to check out. That Cotton Bowl game last year with Florida and Oklahoma, that's the epitome of where we've reached with now major bowl games. That was an embarrassment. Or maybe Dan Mullen's just an embarrassment. And maybe once he leaves or goes somewhere, that'll cease. No, I'm just kidding. That was an embarrassment, and Dan Mullen made it worse.
I'm going to quote to you a quote from my top 10 favorite movies, top favorite sports movie of all time. Attitude reflect leadership, Captain. Those players all sitting out of that game and then showcasing Kyle Pitts on the Jumbotron, wishing all his freshmen good luck, the ones that he abandoned. God, that was the most classless thing I've seen in a long time. Trust me, that a lot of that is a direct result of their leadership. I don't think how many Alabama players sit out the Citrus Bowl when we played Michigan? 2.
Maybe 2. Okay, yeah, that was going to be my guess. I remember
one was
Trayvon
Diggs, who had already quit on us earlier in that season anyway, and one was another one it wasn't even starting.
Trayvon Diggs is doing
Jerry
pretty well
Jeudy
for
played in that
right
game.
Now.
Yes, he is.
He's like the best cornerback in the league.
I don't usually follow players when they get to the NFL, but I've heard a lot about him doing that.
Goodness.
Shame he couldn't play with this kind of effort when he his last season at Alabama. Anyway, man, I've taken enough of your time.
Well, I appreciate it.
So I'll go and let you go, and have a good day tomorrow.
Thanks, Reasonable Gump. You too. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Good evening, Mark. It's George in Oregon.
George. Florida's playing South Carolina. Okay.
I'm not really interested in Florida football right now.
Come on. It's your team. Hang in there.
Listen, let's just take a break about football for a second after that last phone call. Let us all just calm down.
Football. This would be the voice of college football. This is the only thing that comes from my mouth, except for ranting about grocery store trips earlier in the show. Yes.
Hey, Mozart's Ghost Story said Georgie, so the chat's loving it. Anyway, the other guy said Florida who? See, he's right there with me. But anyway, I took my car to the alternator store yesterday in the battery shop, and the guy put it on the tester, and we stood there, and he showed me, and he said, $300, new alternator. He'll do it, a year guarantee. I spent all day watching Google videos about how to change a rectifier, and it got so complicated. I said, screw it. I'm going to go to a junkyard and just get one off a used car, buy a rebuilt one. But then I went to the auto parts store, and I said, will you put this on your machine and check it? The alternator was putting out 14.5 amps. It was perfect, or volts, or whatever it is. Everything was perfect. My battery was dead. So I went back to the guy that told me the wrong thing, because I've known him for like 10 years. And I bought a battery from him and told him, you fucked up yesterday. And he said, oh, sorry, man. I had no idea what happened. I don't know if he was trying to rip me off or if we're not friends anymore. So that's a good story. George just saved $260.
Well done.
Okay, back to football.
I'm always impressed with a person that saves, that circumvents the system and is able to save some money. Good job.
The only reason I mentioned that is there's younger people in the chat, and I want them to know the value of getting a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like ask them, don't go with the first one. If two people agree, if you go to 6 different doctors with an ailment, you'll get 6 different diagnoses. Just pick the one that you like the best, the least lethal one, and go with that one. All doctors, you go in to see them and they go, oh, we got to do this right away. There's no time. We better schedule surgery. Have you ever noticed this?
I have
I know a
not
guy that
come
when he
across
got
that
his back
situation
surgery,
very often myself.
Yeah, I know a guy that just had back surgery after an auto accident, and that doctor said, we got to get you right now, no time for second opinion. And then later on, my kid went and took his x-rays and shit to a different doctor after it had already been done. And the doctor said, you didn't need surgery. That's insane. Isn't that horrible? Anyway, the reason I'm saying this is there's this player called Anthony Anderson for Georgia.
Yes.
This is a state of insanity. You're telling me a guy that's going to be a first-round draft choice, he's living his life. He's number one in every statistic. This is a big star. You're telling me this guy raped a girl at a party the other day? That don't even seem right on the face of it, does it? And I have daughters, so I'm not down on girls in general, and I don't want them to be raped in particular. But what are you doing at a party with Anthony Anderson and all those kind of guys getting raucous and having a good time, maybe getting drunk probably? It don't make sense. The whole damn thing is just shady to me. Don't seem right. It doesn't pass the smell
make
test.
sense? Like this doesn't happen on a fairly regular basis?
I don't think Adam Anderson raped the girl. I think he's cognizant enough, even if he's drunk,
How can you
to
make
know
that
he would
call,
lose
George?
$50 million. That's a $50 million piece of butt then.
Yeah, he
He
doesn't.
just lost $50 million.
You know how many guys do stupid things constantly over lust,
I'm a guy.
money,
I've been drunk. I've been in
power?
that situation.
Those 3 things have screwed
Now,
no men
Mark-
throughout the years.
Mark.
Lust, money, power.
Mark, I've had several girls in my life. I'm 61. And the way the thing went, they went, no, and pushed me away. And if I wouldn't continue going for it, they would say, hey, dummy, this is the way I like to do it. And then I would go ahead and do it because it would scare me. I'd be like, does she really mean stop? This is a very difficult situation when
you're hooking up with the
young
wrong
and horny.
woman. Oh,
Yeah, I was
all
a
right.
club manager. I was a club manager in the Air Force. And this one girl just told me to my face, I want you to rape me in a bathroom. And I was like, are there cameras? Am I going to get in trouble? But I did it, But it wasn't really rape. She wanted me to pretend that and I'm like, I was young. I was 18. I was like, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Like, is she serious? Guys are innocent concerning this kind of shit, until we get older. Anyway, enough about that.
What are we on to now?
Somebody said Oklahoma said somebody said Oklahoma's going to get blown out 3 times before the season over. Is that possible?
Get blown out?
I forget who knows.
No, they're not getting blown
Yeah.
out.
He-
No.
Okay.
I'll
But
buy
they
the
could
teams on their
lose 3
schedule.
games, though.
Oh, they could lose
Could they lose?
them. I don't think they're
Okay.
going to. They could. They're playing 4
I
good
just thought
teams.
that was right. I thought that was an interesting take on things. Imagine that. Lose 3 times.
Well,
Not used Dexter
yes.
wants to know if he can pay daily, if he can pay 17 cents a day. Is there a way to do that?
That 17
Instead of
cents
doing a whole
each
$5
day
a week.
would come out of his account. Yeah. He'll have to call up Patreon, deal with those folks on that one.
Okay.
It's kind of an odd way to go about it, but hey.
I just thought he'd like to know you saw his question. Okay. I have a question. Florida gets chided all the time for not playing tough out-of-conference opponents. Where's playing Samford at some point? Samford. I still don't know where Samford is. Do you? Does anybody know who Samford is?
Alabama?
Not
Samford.
Stanford, is it? Alabama.
Samford.
But
Yes.
we get chided for that, So if we get chided, we're still playing Kentucky, Tennessee, LSU, Georgia, FSU. I mean, we got, Texas A&M every couple of years. if that's true, talking about strength of schedule and all that, how could Cincinnati, Wake Forest? Well, see, Wake Forest is in that conference with Clemson, though. But I don't see how they could do it, playing the schedules they play. I don't get it. How can you be considered equal when you play that schedule, when you have one game a year you play, or maybe two? Everybody else is a JV team.
Well, here's the deal, is that Florida always plays Florida State. And as long as Florida State's good, then your non-conference schedule is respectable. When Florida State sucks, like they have the last 3 or 4 years, then your non-conference schedule sucks as well. Unless you pick up somebody like Michigan, like you did a few years ago.
Right. And this is a down year for the ACC. So would Wake Forest, can they be considered upper echelon when all the other teams around them are going 5 and 7 or whatever it is?
Did you say a down year for the ACC? This is a down year?
Yeah.
Last year was a down year. The year before was a down year. The year before that was a down.
Exactly.
I think this is the norm for the ACC.
Right. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. People getting mad because they're not in the playoffs. They haven't earned the right. A New Year's Six Bowl should be what they aspire for.
Who are we talking about?
Playoffs?
Who are we talking about that's upset that they didn't make the playoffs, that didn't earn it?
Well, people from Cincinnati or Wake Forest, they want to.
Well, those are two different situations. Wake Forest will have a much better resume than Cincinnati if they go undefeated, which is unlikely.
Right, which everyone says cannot happen.
All right, George.
All right, my season's over. My season's over. I'm living vicariously through other people's programs. I just enjoy watching the games now. It's a lot of fun. All the pressure's off.
Have a good one.
Hey, there's football tonight. There's some good games tonight. Tell everybody what's on TV tonight.
Talked about it. All right. Later.
All right.
Be
later.
good.
Bye.
All right. Here we go. At the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. It's Ben. How are you today?
I am doing well, Ben. How are you?
Pretty good. Hey, I wanted to ask you what you thought about James. I haven't got to watch much your show this week. What do you think about the James Franklin possibly going to USC or LSU? How likely do you think that is?
Well, first off, man, that's a rough week for you. Anyway, James Franklin to USC.
Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why real quick. I'll tell you why. It's that I'm going through my rehab from last week.
Okay. Hopefully everything's fine. Everything good?
Well, no, Michigan lost to Michigan State, so it was a rehab week.
Rehab in quotes. Got it. I was taking that as something a little more
you're taking me literal
than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
So you're curious about James Franklin to USC, which I think is the most probable of. I do not see LSU for some reason hiring James Franklin. I can see the Mel Tucker move to LSU and the James Franklin move to USC. And so you're asking me,
do you think it's a good idea for either USC or LSU?
I think that there are very few coaches in this country that are just a lock to do an amazing job anywhere they go. And one of them's coaching in the NFL right now, and one of them's at Alabama, and that's probably where he's going to retire. And those are the only two surefire certainties in the sport. We can poke holes in everybody else's resume besides those two guys. Yeah. Even Dabo Swinney, we can say, well, he's never done it anywhere else. Maybe he's done a nice job building the Clemson situation, but could he just pick up and leave and go somewhere else and build Oklahoma State into a national contender? We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the reason I kind of asked you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And
I think Dabo Swinney would probably.
Go ahead. Keep going.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, I paused there. I was just going to say that in James Franklin, we have a gold medal mentality in this country. So if someone has not won the championship, then they're considered fill in the blank chokers, or they can't get it done, or whatever. Okay, there's only one national championship each season, and one guy's winning half of them. So there's not going to be very many left. And the other guy that won 3 in the last 12 or 13 years, he's gone. So there's not many national championships to be won. And so I think that James Franklin's done a nice job. I think he's a really good coach who lifted Vandy. He took an opportunity to lift Vandy during a downtime in the SEC Eastern Division, but still, who's going 9-4 at Vandy back-to-back years and going 5-3 in the conference at Vandy? Then he goes to Penn State, and he was handed Bill O'Brien certainly put him on good footing and stabilized that program, but still that they weren't anywhere close to where they are now. So he lifted them from 7-5 type status to major bowl status. You know, they haven't gotten past Ohio State, but he's finished in the top 10 to 15 in the country 2016, 17, 18, 19, and we'll see about this season. So I think he's a very good coach. I think he's one of the 10 or 15 best coaches in the country, but is he an automatic slam dunk winner to take USC to heights that they haven't achieved since Pete Carroll? No, he hasn't done it elsewhere, but I think he's a good hire.
Gotcha. Well, that's part of the reason I was asking, because one of the little bit of your show I was watching, I heard you talking a little bit about Jim Harbaugh and I don't think you were directly, but you were talking about Harbaugh not getting it done in Michigan and about possibly looking for a replacement, possibly time. And I didn't watch the whole show because my heart was hurting too much. I couldn't take it. Just to be honest, I was like, I can't take it. But when I look at James Franklin and I compare Harbaugh, I don't see much of it. I mean, honestly, James Franklin's lost 3 games this year, and two of them they really didn't have business. Well, at least one of them they didn't have any business losing. And people are talking about him going to LSU or USC, and here Harbaugh lost 1 game this year to a Michigan State at home that came off a bye that has a running back that just went off, and also the bad calls on the field. I don't see. Is that just a bias towards Harbaugh? Is that a bias, or is that because you expect Michigan to have a do better than Penn State or hold them to a higher standard?
It's either a Harbaugh bias or it's a recency bias. This is why. Since Harbaugh joined Michigan, and I think he did an exceptional job immediately in 2015 and 16. And then, of course, James Franklin was already at Penn State, and his first big season, his breakthrough, was in 2016, that their results have been pretty comparable. Yes, Michigan and Penn State. However, Penn State has beaten Ohio State once. That was a bit of a flukish win. Penn State people would get on me, but they did it. It wasn't like they needed help from an official or anything like that. It was a legitimate win, but they squeaked by. And so James Franklin has done something Jim Harbaugh has not done. He's beaten Ohio State, and he's gone on to a Big Ten championship game and won the Big Ten championship. But I think this is more of a distinction. Jim Harbaugh has routinely, especially, of course, these last 2 years, been blown out, embarrassed by Ohio State. James Franklin has never been embarrassed by Ohio State post 2013. So starting in 2014, even against the national championship Ohio State team in 2014, and his team went 7-6. They took Ohio State to double overtime in that game, a 7-6 Penn State team. And every year since then, they have played Ohio State razor close in many of those games. 2 of those games, they had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter. And sure, you can jump on James Franklin for blowing the lead, but they also lost by 1 point twice to really good Ohio State teams. That Ohio State team in 2019 killed everyone except Penn State. They have routinely played Ohio State well, including last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, they played a tough game, and even after the Illinois game, they lost to Illinois. But here's the thing: look at who's Ohio State's biggest rivalry in the Big Ten. It's not Penn State.
Sure.
Who do they prepare all year for? I mean, they've admitted that they have drills that they run every practice every week.
So
preparing for who?
Really, you're going to go to that degree?
Well, I'm not. I'm just
Michigan's
saying
performances against Ohio State. Penn State has played.
No, I'm not.
Again, bottom line, I'm just stating
it's
that
not comparing apples to apples.
Sure, it is comparing
I'm
apples
not defending.
to apples.
I'm just saying it's not comparing apples to apples.
Oh, this is a comparison of apples to apples, if there ever was one. 2 teams that play in the same division, that play basically the same schedule, have 2 head coaches that have been coaching at those schools for roughly the same period of time. We can compare them. That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
It's one of the few in college football that we can just be like, okay, Harbaugh, Franklin. It's comparable, and it's not a blowout. It's not like, oh, one's winning the Big Ten every year and is great, and the other one's awful. It's not like comparing Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh. It's comparing Harbaugh and Franklin, and it's a good discussion, but I think Franklin has a decided advantage. He's won a Fiesta Bowl. He's won a Cotton Bowl. He's won 2 major bowl games. He came within a field goal of beating one of the best teams in the country, USC, in a great classic Rose Bowl game. So he's played 3 really good bowl games, New Year's 6 games, and won 2 of them. Harbaugh's played in 2, 2016, 2018, 2 New Year's Day games, and they got embarrassed once. The other one was close, of course, the Florida State game.
Yeah. Well, you make a good point with getting embarrassed by Ohio State. We are tired. I mean, I am tired of watching that. Every Michigan fan is. But I mean, that's that. But Ohio State, they can blow out anybody at any given time. Not to say that. I mean, I understand
apparently,
that,
except Penn State.
But the thing is, if you look at like strength, there's things that you can compare that Harbaugh's gone up against that James Franklin hasn't, because we played Harbaugh every year. Just a quick question: who's the last 7 years? Who's been the strongest team in the West?
Wisconsin.
And we played them every year except for the first year Harbaugh was there.
Okay.
So, and then you add all the other big non-conference teams. We've always played another non-conference Power 5 team. Not that I'm saying that Penn State hasn't, but I wouldn't be sure. But I know they haven't played Wisconsin every year.
So let me ask you this. When Penn State has played Wisconsin, have they performed better against Wisconsin than Michigan has? I'll answer that question for you. Yes, they have.
Well, then this year, but yeah, and Michigan got blown out by them. 2 years.
Well, they both beat them this year. So.
Yeah, but Michigan had them by far the more dominant performance.
So really, we're going to go with a more dominant performance. They both beat them this year.
Yeah, they both beat them. But,
yes.
I mean, if we're going to go with the more dominant loss to Ohio State, we have to start looking at it the other way too.
Yeah, but I'm talking about 7 years. I'm not talking about one particular comparison of game to game. Penn State went up there on week 1 and they took care of business and they got the job done. Yes, Michigan was more dominant. They broke open a close game at halftime. What was it, like 13-10 at half, and took care of it, and were a little bit more dominant than Penn State, which came down to the last possession. True, but I'm talking about Penn State outplaying Michigan against Ohio State for 7 years.
Yeah. But here's and I understand that. But here's my counterpoint, is that Michigan has had a tougher schedule than Penn State in that time, and they're winning like the same amount of games.
Well, first of all, they're not winning the same amount of games.
They're about, what are they? They're like both averaging like 3 losses a season.
Penn State's got a better record than Michigan going back to pick your year. And I guarantee Penn State's got a better record. Not by a ton, but they got a better record.
2018, 2016,
so,
2015.
Sure, whatever. Yeah. So
I mean, Michigan's averaging 3 losses a season since Harbaugh's been there.
Since 2016, James Franklin has played Wisconsin 3 times. He's 3-0.
Okay.
I'm just pointing out that it's a good discussion. There is a comparison. It's not a joke. It's not like you jumped on here and said, compare Ryan Day and Greg Schiano or something like that. And I laughed and hung up on you. It's a good conversation, but James Franklin has done a better job at Penn State than Jim Harbaugh has done at Michigan. He just has.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's not as far off.
True.
I mean,
you're right. It's not. No, it's
people
not
are like ready
that
to
far. But I think and that's
the point. And there can be arguments made for Jim Harbaugh, I think, especially when you look at strength of conference or strength of schedule compared to what James Franklin has gone up against. I mean, we've not only played Wisconsin, we've almost every year. We played, Florida. We played Notre Dame twice. There's been a lot of this year was both. I mean, Washington was not. I mean, they got Auburn this year. That was great. I mean, Washington ended up being a dud, but I mean, generally, I think Michigan's had a stronger schedule, and that was just the kind of the point. That's kind of what I was saying. I think we kind of make it a long discussion out of it.
Okay, so it's 1, 2, and 2, 2 and 3. So Michigan is 3-3 since 2016 against Wisconsin, and Penn State's 3-0. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I mean,
good stuff.
Okay, well, yeah, and that's what I was just wondering if maybe you had I was wondering what your take on it was. I mean, I can't see realistically, James Franklin being the sought after coach and people giving Harbaugh such a hard time.
Well,
about everything
you're
he does.
You're not going to be able to find.
I look at him comparable.
You're not going to be able to find 10 or 15 coaches in America that have a better record than James Franklin. Both at Penn State and then considering Vanderbilt. Going 9-4 2 consecutive years at Vanderbilt. Who's ever done that? The answer is no one. Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. You have a good one.
You too. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, how's it going, Mark? This is Emmanuel again.
Hey, Emmanuel. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going? Hey, I wanted to ask you a question because you know everything about college football.
Well, I don't, but you can think that.
There you go. I do. So it must be real. I was hearing about Clemson the other day, and Paul Feinbaum said that Clemson days are over of being the dominant program.
Yeah, I heard him say
David
that.
Pollack mentioned that. Yeah. So is Clemson, Florida State, and Miami for this era?
Is Clemson what?
Miami or Florida State? Have they fallen from grace?
So is Clemson
Feinbaum
going to
says
be?
they're done.
Sure. Is Clemson going to be what
Yeah.
Miami and Florida State are now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see
is that what's going to
happening.
happen because they were powerhouses? No.
So understand, when you ask me or you hear from Paul Feinbaum or anyone, the first thing everybody needs to understand is that we are giving an estimate. We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Mhm.
You know, nobody knew what USC was going to be when Pete Carroll took over, that he was going to be legendary and they were going to be dominant for a decade. And then when he left, that they were going to just drop. Texas, we could go on and on. So Clemson, let's understand that prior to Dabo Swinney, for decades and decades, has been a top 15 program in the country. So if you go through the 70s, the 80s, through the 90s, up to 2009 with Dabo Swinney, Clemson, they've had their ups and downs. They're 6-6 and 7-5 seasons, but they've also collected plenty of 10-2 seasons. So they've been good, but not challenging for national championships. So obviously he's done what he's accomplished. And now he just because he's lost 3 football games, people are going crazy. They've got a bad offense, and they still have a top 5 defense in America. And they have been just riddled by key injuries, which everybody's beat up at this time of year. Everyone is, but they're pretty high on the list of injuries. They do play in a weak conference, so it's not like they've had to do what they've done this year and been, had to face Texas A&M and Ole Miss and Auburn every week. But at the same time, let's remember that this same Clemson team played the team that we all agree is the best team in the country. Look what happened in that game. DJ threw a pick 6. That was a bad decision. Otherwise, the game's 3-3. So they're pretty good. They're like, to these outlandish, all of a sudden, just because a team loses a couple games. I remember Paul Feinbaum saying after Nick Saban and Alabama lost to Urban Meyer and Ohio State in 2014 that they were done. Alabama was never going to be the same. That was the end of that. Urban Meyer's left for Ohio State, and he's taken over. And Alabama, Nick Saban, that dynasty's done. I remember him saying that. I don't know that they can keep up what they've done to expect Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson to continue what they've done over the past 7 or 8 years. It's just not mathematically feasible over a long period of time. They are all winning well over 90% of their games, like 92% of their games. That's just not sustainable. Now, for Saban in Alabama, it might be in the short term, but of course, he's going to coach for how much longer? 3 years, 5 years? I don't know what it's going to be. He just turned 70. Maybe he's going to coach for 10 years. Maybe he's going to be he's a healthy man. I hope he coaches as long as he wants to coach. But to sustain 92% winning percentage, Dabo Swinney's not going to do that at Clemson. But he can still win most of the ACC championships and go to the playoff. Maybe not every year, but he's going to be successful at Clemson. I would be surprised if they suddenly become some 7-5 Louisville kind of program. All right. Well, I think we lost him. So that's my take on Dabo Swinney and the demise of the Clemson program. Can they keep up what they've been doing from 2015 through 2020? No, I don't believe they will. That was 6 consecutive conference championships. That was, what, 4 appearances in the national championship game. That's 2 national championships. That is not sustainable. Winning 92 or 93% of your games. That's not going to be sustainable for a coach who sticks around for 15 or 20 years. There's going to be an 8-4. There's going to be a 9-3. There's going to be a couple 9-3s in a row. It's going to happen. Saban is able to bust the curve. Urban Meyer busted the curve. These are the only 2 guys that have done this since fill in the blank. Bud Wilkinson in the 50s, Ara Parsegan in the 60s, maybe. Woody Hayes for stretches of time. Bo Schembechler didn't reach those kind of heights. His teams consistently finished in the top 10 in America. And if any Miami fan says Miami, yes, they pretty much sustained that kind of winning percentage from the early 80s for about a decade, but with 1, 2, 3 coaches. Three coaches. So in terms of one particular coach, yeah. We've seen 2 guys do it since I've been alive. All right. Win 90%. And Saban didn't do that his entire career. He's done that at LSU and Alabama. All right. I think we are done for the night. Nobody on the lines. Appreciate everybody being here. Thanks so much for the calls. Again, we've got a Nebraska, Ohio State watch party for you. So I'll be just hanging out watching the Huskers and the Buckeyes go at it. And you can drive by and just jump on in the chat and talk it up with me and everybody else. We're going to have some Nebraska folks drop by and also Ohio State. And otherwise, we're going to just check out the games. I'm going to be watching a ton of noon games. So I'll be watching everybody at the same time as much as I possibly can, but it's not much of a noon window. I think in addition, let's see real quick, in addition to Ohio State, Nebraska, I will be keeping an eye on Georgia, Missouri for about 7 minutes. I think about 7 minutes of game time. Once that hits 28-0, okay, gone. Air Force and Army start at 11:30. How about that? I like that on CBS. Okay, that's nice. Wake Forest, North Carolina, important game, of course, for the Demon Deacons. Keep in mind that is not an ACC game. It's an out-of-conference game. Liberty, Ole Miss could be intriguing. Minnesota, Illinois, maybe not so much, although Illinois was good enough to beat Penn State. Maybe they pull off the upset and take on Minnesota here. And, of course, it's a big game for Minnesota to maintain control of the Big Ten Western Division. That's the noon window. SMU in Memphis is fairly interesting to a certain extent if you love the group of 5. We've got a group of 5 video coming out at 9 o'clock. What time is it? Probably just came out. 9 o'clock with Steve Helwick from SB Nation talking about Cincinnati, SMU, Memphis, and Houston. So check out that video. Check out all the channels. Please subscribe to any channels that are less than 1,000 for sure. If you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, check out any of the channels and please subscribe. If we get past 1,000, then you can unsubscribe if you'd like. But we need to get these channels past 1,000. It's huge for us. Appreciate everybody being here. We will see you tomorrow at noon Eastern, 11 Central for you Husker fans in the Central Time Zone for the Buckeyes and Nebraska. And then, of course, we'll be going live throughout the day, instant analysis, the whole deal right here at the Voice of College Football. And also there's going to be a Virginia Tech, Boston College postgame show right here at the Voice of College Football as well. See you tomorrow at noon Eastern, 11 Central.